death is a second away. People die every 5 minutes from a fentanyl overdose in America. There's 200 a day. It's a plane crash every day that's happening, and we're not doing anything about it, right? And so that's why we're here. The old way is out. The game's changed, the drugs changed, intervention has changed, and treatment's got to change.
This episode of Die Sober discusses sensitive topics that may be triggering to some viewers. If you are experiencing an emergency and need help, please call 911 or contact the National Suicide Hotline at 988.
For non-emergency assistance, please use us as a resource. Visit us at thefirmaddictionconsulting.com, or for more information, call us 615-210-6703. Welcome back, everybody, to the Die Sober podcast. I'm joined today again by my friend and companion, Zach Livingston. Welcome back, Zach.
Thanks, man. It's good to be back.
Today, we're going to be talking about late-stage addiction. We're going to be talking about how families can support and love with proper attunement rather than attachment. And we're going to talk about how friends and family can also set boundaries as a means of love and support. But first things first, Zach, tell me about late-stage addiction. Not that you would know personally anything about late-stage addiction.
I might know a thing or two about a thing or two personally.
But in general, paint us a picture, late-stage addiction, late-stage alcoholism. And I say late-stage, I think teenagers can be there just as much as, 30, 40-year
check me out, right?
Users.
Late stage alcoholism, late stage drug addiction, whichever one, doesn't matter. But they both get a lot of times the wrong rap. You know what I mean? Because what we picture is like that dude under the bridge, like asking for change, drinking Mad Dog 2020, like pushing a shopping cart.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that. I'm just kidding.
That's not what it necessarily looks like. Like we've done interventions with guys and gals that were in late stage addiction, and they had a 3-car garage, and on one side there was a Maserati and another one was a Bentley, and there's an Aston Martin in the middle. Like, you can have all the outside things in the world to kind of use as like this curtain to hide behind. Like, it's not late stage addiction, but really what it boils down to is look at consequences, dude. You know what I mean? Look, simple questions. How are the relationships in and out of the family? How are the relationships in the professional world? What about legal consequences? What about health consequences? That one's a huge marker for late stage addiction, late stage alcoholism.
Right.
You know, I mean, and age doesn't have really anything to do with that. The last intervention that I did, a week ago, guy in his mid-30s, drinking so much that, it was wearing away at the lining of his esophagus. He's coughing up blood every night. Right? Late stage.
Right. At a fairly young age, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Mid-30s better still be young. I'm in trouble.
Been at it daily for 15, 17 years, right? All right. Let me ask you another question.
Shoot.
Family recognizes, hey, my loved one is in late stage, right? The consequences from, we've got legal stuff, we've got financial issues. There's been highlight events at family dinners, absences at big family events. We know this person is struggling, right? Come in cold off the sideline. Where are you at coaching this family? Like, we know this guy has a problem. How do we approach? How do we set boundaries properly while keeping ourselves sane, right?
Yeah.
Like, we don't want to volunteer to be a victim.
No, not at all.
Right?
And a lot of times that's what happens. You volunteer to become a victim of their own addictions, right? And
you're saying the family is volunteering to be a victim.
Yeah, absolutely. Sometimes when they're not coached and they don't know what the next best step is, a lot of times that is what it looks like. Because oftentimes they'll fall into like that trap of working harder to find a solution than the person struggling, right? And that's okay, provided that it's in the right context. Right. So for me, like, step one, outside looking in, is, if I want to make an approach, the family wants to make an approach, and I want to coach them, well, we obviously need to do that as a unified front. So it can, in that sense, take a similar standpoint, similar approach as it would, in the initial phases of an intervention, identifying the different players in the family and what their strong points and their weaknesses are. so that we can work on that first, so that we can become unified and then make that approach.
Right. We get a lot of calls from families who have one or two family members that are interested in possible intervention or having a conversation with their loved one about their drug or alcohol abuse, right?
Yeah.
The rest of the family, for one reason or another, is not yet interested, right? So a lot of times that's the first bit of coaching that we do. The first real intervention is securing the entire family, right, to get them on board. And from my experience, I think explaining what addiction and what alcoholism really is and what it really looks like to families can be really helpful, because families just know what normal is by what they've seen in their lives, right? Normal versus healthy don't always line up.
No.
Right? So if drinking or if smoking weed or smoking crack has always been part of Thanksgiving, right? That's just the family norm, right? Or it can be dismissed as, he's just got a little bit of it. He's just always been anxious. He's always been depressed, right? And it's almost like a family has decided to we'll just duck our heads and hope for the best. It's just a phase, right? And we know it's not a phase.
It's a phase when it lasts a couple months, not a couple decades.
Right. And in today's world, with the incidents of fentanyl, xylazine, instant overdose, one pill can kill, as the DEA new tagline says. Casual use to this late stage addiction that we're talking about, that bridge,
it's short.
Real short. Right. And so what I want to do is help these families recognize, everybody on that side of the screen, recognize symptoms, behaviors that go along with late stage, right? And let's dispel this myth that late stage looks like an older person, like you say, living under the bridge, or completely destitute, already lost my job. Late stage addiction can still look fairly normal in some circumstances, right?
It can.
But if you look behind the curtain, I think you said the curtain. Mm-hmm. What do my relationships look like? What am I doing in my free time? What is my communication pattern? Is it changing? Right? Mm-hmm. What's my sleep pattern? What is my physical appearance? Right? These are all telltale.
Yeah.
Young lady that we've been to see a couple times, East Tennessee, right?
Yep. Okay.
Her physical appearance changed so much between visit 1, visit 2, from slightly unhealthy to I'm surprised this person is breathing, right? And that was less than 90 days?
It was. She kind of looked like a strong breeze would just blow her away. And she was so frail and thin by the time we saw her the second time.
Right.
And she was 20. That's it.
20. Started using at 19. Got her at 20.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That's what we're seeing more and more of, right? And that's what families, I think, are still being caught off guard, because they're seeing these young, healthy, vibrant teens to early adults have such a fast shift, right?
Yeah, and it's the drugs are usually what expedites that process. Alcoholics, it's slow for the most part. Typically, it's pretty slow. I heard one guy kind of said it best. He's like, well, the dinosaurs have been extinct, right? Like back in the day, and even not that long ago back in the day, I think 80s, 90s, stuff like that. Like there's a lot of alcoholics that were only using alcohol. Right now, that's very rare to find a person who drinks and only drinks and never even smokes an occasional joint. It's rare,
right?
Or have never done it. And as we know, like with the pills, with the fentanyl even being in the cocaine, drugs that even when I was in high school were not really considered a recreational thing, now being considered a recreational thing.
Right.
It expedites that process.
Normal has come down.
Yeah, it expedites the process a lot. Right. When I was in high school, cocaine wasn't the normal thing. Was like we go to a house party, you get drunk, and you smoke a couple blunts or whatever.
Right.
That's not the case anymore. Now, cocaine is the recreational drug of choice, like social drug of choice. In a lot of different areas in the country.
And Xanax bars.
And pain pills. And the list goes on.
X pills, ecstasy,
right.
MDMA, right?
So my belief is that it just, it expedites that pattern to where, when I was in high school, I was afraid of like the harder drugs for the most part. Mm-hmm. But if the harder drugs were the norm, then the fear wouldn't have been there. I still would have titrated the same way, but I probably would have titrated even sooner. And I'm a guy who, per the doctor, was a late stage chronic alcoholic when I was 28.
Right.
Because at that point, I had 6 months to live if I kept drinking.
But I think where a lot of families get stuck is the term addict is so scary.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
If we just said potential patient, we might get a little bit further with families. But the stigma is real, and we've talked about it before. But the term addict is so tough for moms and dads and significant others and siblings to swallow that I think it makes the phone too heavy to pick up. I think it makes it too difficult to get into, even a Google search to start looking for signs of a drug issue in a loved one. And that's one of the things I hope we get to accomplish here on this pod is to help these families understand the true warning signs, right? Like to me, the money never lies, right?
Yeah.
If you can get into a young person's transaction history, particularly with payment apps.
Oh yeah.
You can find out what's up.
Oh yeah.
Credit cards don't lie. Missing cash doesn't lie. Stories around needing additional or, untimed, oddly timed funding for events that just seem to pop up. Crises that seem to happen more and more frequently that have a need for an infusion of cash, right? Physical appearance. Not all in addiction get leaner. Some do add weight, but most of the time you're seeing a reduction in normal weight.
Yep.
Not all of the time are you seeing a difference in sleep pattern, but a lot of times you're seeing days get flipped into nights.
Yeah.
Right. Not all of the time, but a lot of the time you're seeing big mood swings on a dime. Right. You know those big. What those big
I know
mood
those
swings
big.
are.
That big. I'm defined by big mood swings when I'm using.
Right. And I'm answering in my hand. Where does the mood swing come from?
Depends on the circumstance, but it almost always comes from the fact that like I need to get messed up and I'm not fucked up.
There it is. I need to get messed up. I don't have my money yet. I don't have my source yet. And I am now uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Right?
The only thing that really changes with that is
what was in my left hand.
Yeah. The only thing that changes with that is like, okay, what's the tangible thing I could point it at in the moment?
Right.
Is it mom? Is it dad? Is it my job? Is it,
Right.
Is it the dog? Whatever. I'll choose anything as long as it's applicable.
Right. Anything to explain or to try to excuse the fact that I'm now acting out.
Yeah.
Right. I am uncomfortable because I have yet to get what I need today.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I got stories upon stories about that.
Right. And we see it in our professional lives every day.
Every day.
Right?
Every day.
And we even see it with guys and girls that we have coached through, not going to treatment, getting into treatment, successfully completing treatment, continuing with a continuing care plan, right? And then still being manipulative, saying, my bed at sober living's on the top bunk, and my my roommate snores, and my chicken got taken. As drug addicts, as recovering drug addicts and alcoholics, and I am one. It takes a long time for me to stop the manipulative pattern, right? And I think one of the main goals of this pod is we want to help moms, dads, siblings, significant others. We want to help you guys figure out what are the manipulating cycles that you volunteer into.
Yeah.
Right? Because again, we're talking about what's normal in the house versus what's healthy in the house. And we all only know what's normal by what we've seen as normal, right?
Yeah.
And so if a young man or a young lady in the household knows how to go to mom, to get to dad, to get the check cut, get it over with, right? Or blame a sibling or an outside issue, go to mom or dad, who goes to mom or dad, gets the check cut, problem solved. Like, it's just a triangle.
Yeah.
It's the same triangle that we see all the time, right? If a mom of a young man comes and asks you today, she says, Zach, I think my son has a drug problem. He's away at school, and we're going to start getting these calls in the next 2 weeks.
Oh,
no
yeah.
doubt.
After, you mess up one too many Thanksgiving dinners, it's...
Yeah, next couple weeks. Freshman, this is start of a semester, right? Start of a semester. Mom and dad knew that things were going funny before the semester, right? Zach, I think my son's been partying too much. What do you think we should do? Do you think he's an alcoholic already? Do you think he's just stressed? Is he just in a fraternity? I know there's a lot of questions. There's a lot of follow-up questions there.
There's so many, because you know it's one of those questions you can't like immediately answer without just having the answer just be based on presumption, which really doesn't work. And even if it did, it's too easy to shoot holes in from the other party. But nonetheless, like if I'll use a family that we worked with before as an example, right? Kid's almost 1,000 miles away in college. And they say, I think he's got a problem. If he's 1,000 miles away and you can't even lay eyes on him, all you can do is talk, and you still think the problem's that bad that you're picking up on it, chances are there's probably a problem.
Right. How do you help families kind of pierce the delusion, right? Because it's one thing if I tell mom, hey, your kid's got a problem. It's an entirely another thing when we lead them to kind of self-actualize the fact that their loved one has a problem.
Let them discover the evidence.
Right.
Run on that example, college kid, I don't know many college kids at all that are, completely paying for college, supporting themselves 100%, so on and so forth, right? So, when families provide money, families should have the right to look at where the money goes. Like, you can see all those things, right? Same with like what the class attendance is looking like. What about the friend groups when they come back? Have they completely shifted? The buddies who he was tight with or she was tight with before, they have an all new different set of friends. Maybe ones that like you kind of heard some things about and don't
or
really
are we completely isolating?
Right. What's the demeanor like when you do see him? Is he excited to see you, or is he like, son of a bitch, I got to deal with these people again? Like, don't you know, like it's almost 6 o'clock. Like, my friends are going out. Like, you guys are blocking this whole thing around. We can't say anything. So how do they get?
Right.
Snippy, moody, right? Agitated, so on and so forth. Right. With that, it's just, to me, a lot of times to pierce the family, to get them to actually accept the fact that there is a problem, I like to lead them in the right direction, but let them discover the evidence in a way that they really can't deny for themselves, versus me being like, here's this. Right.
It's
like I'm building a police report.
It's holding the mirror up.
Yeah.
And saying, hey, what are your red flags so far?
Right.
Like, what, let's start first. What made you pick up the phone today? Right? Why are we talking?
Yeah.
Right?
This is the best start.
You get that answer. Well, because he got his second DUI, or he's failed out of a class, or she's, run up a huge credit card bill, or whatever. And then I just go back from there. Tell me a little bit more. Tell me a little bit more. What are some other times you've been concerned, right, with decision making or outcomes that have involved drinking or possible drug use with your loved one, right? And then they'll, maybe lay another one out. And then there's usually something that just binds them all together. Like, that you can almost feel the dots connected, right? And that's why I love to do, when we have new families call us, I love to do these on Zoom or Teams. Because there's just a little bit there with a facial connection, rather than hearing a voice on the phone, right?
Plus, when it's only one person on the phone too, you only get one person's insight and point of view and everything else. But when you get everybody on that Zoom or that conference call and you get this full 360,
Right.
a lot of the times it's not just me learning about the individual. The other family members are learning new things about where it's like, oh shit, I didn't know that.
Right.
He called you and asked you for how much money for a phone bill?
Right.
I just gave him $100 for a phone
I was
bill.
paying the phone bill.
Right.
Right.
I know a kid one time he called his dad talking about how his car got a flat tire, but he needed to fish this bass tournament. So he needed $150 to enter, but like, don't worry, I'm gonna win and pay you back. And there's no bass tournament.
Right.
There's no fishing tournament. The list goes on, man. Like, follow the money, follow the friends, follow the demeanors, the behaviors, the ins and outs of their day to day, and as well as open communication with the rest of the family. And chances are, like, we won't need to paint a picture. They'll pretty much paint it themselves.
Right. Really. So it's a damned if you do, damned if you don't thing now. And I'm not speaking out both sides of my mouth, but pre-fentanyl, pre-xylazine, I'd say observed action over time.
Yeah.
Make a plan.
It was a lot safer.
Make a plan, right? Post fentanyl, xylazine, it's just a new era in our world as interventionists.
Yeah.
And how quickly you want to act, right? And I'm not a fear monger, and I'm probably the worst salesman in the intervention business, right? Like, I give away way too much time on these Zooms and Teams calls with families we might work with, right? And I just consider it kind of goodwill, right?
Yeah.
This is me, doing for a family who isn't sure yet, right? And typically the karma comes back and finds us, right? I feel like it's not transactional. We might not get hired that day, but because it took the time to answer some questions for a concerned family, we get hired, the next week, whatever. It all works out. I truly want families to be able to have access to real information and real problem solving, right?
Yeah, and there's also too, like, a lot of the families that, like, they're going to compare stuff to how it once was pre-fentanyl, because that's what they grew up in, especially the parents, right? We're staying on top of all that.
But that's a great point too, because parents that are parents of the next generation older than us, right? Like, I'm the top end of one. Yeah. You're the bottom end of my generation, so 45, 35.
And I'm at when I got sober too, I was at the true, like, at least in Nashville, like, beginning of, like, this is now the fentanyl era.
Right.
Like, I got sober about a year into that.
You go from $200 a gram for heroin to $5 for fentanyl.
So even when I was growing up and I was, for the vast majority of my own use, like, we were pre-fentanyl time period too.
Right.
Games changed.
But around the potency of today's marijuana products with the wax, with the gummies, we're seeing part-time THC users, right, who may or may not have any sort of addiction issue, right? They're just relieving a little stress.
Right.
Go into full-blown psychosis with the Delta 8, the Delta 9, Delta 10s, these unregulated products. You don't know what's in them.
No,
right?
and even the ones that you do with the THC levels being that high,
right,
it's still there's still an uptick.
I don't stand on any moral high ground saying smoke or don't, but I do want to point out to families out there, if you're concerned that your loved one is smoking too much, or you're unsure of the source, being concerned is okay.
Yeah, asking
questions is okay.
Yeah, because and truth be told, like, the bud that my mom and dad may have smoked back in the 70s and 80s is a whole lot different than the bud that we were smoking before we got sober. And the bud today is a lot different than the bud
exponentially
that we were smoking.
Exponentially stronger, right?
Way different. Way different.
And delivered way different.
Yeah, and I think just across the board, like, pretty much in the drug market as a whole, everything has been titrated up. Everything that was like the top is now not the top. There's a new top, and it just seems like one of those things where there's been no glass ceiling, like people may have once upon a time believed that there would be.
Right.
Like, everything's gotten stronger. Everything's gotten, more manufactured and more available.
And cheaper.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, a good old-fashioned alcoholic is really rare. Let's say we do 50 full-blown interventions a year. It'd be a pretty good number, right? Of those 50, I'd say fewer than 10% would be alcohol only.
Yeah.
Right? And of all of those considered, I would say that there's co-occurring disorders, legit, by the DSM, not by my non-clinical eye. We're not docs, but once they're admitted to treatment, I would say there's a legit co-occurring disorder in almost all of them.
Yeah,
right?
just about. And by just about, I would say, like, you know, if we had the data in front of us, we'd be talking 90-some%.
Right, but I think in particularly post-COVID, as a society, we're more able to say, hey, I've got anxiety. Hey, I've got some adjustment. Hey, I'm depressed. Hey, I'm having feelings of being overwhelmed, suicidal ideation. Right? People are a little bit more open to saying those things now. A little, right?
I was going to say emphasis on a little.
On a little, but I'll take a little. I'll take 1% all the time, right? And I think we get to be part of that solution where talking about our feelings and talking about being overwhelmed becomes normal, right? You know, I've recently was overwhelmed, you know, and had personal stuff going on, family loss in my family, you know, business stuff not go ideal, and you know, I had to reach out to the men in my life, right, and say, hey, I'm really overwhelmed right now, man, and I need some accountability, right? And I think, like, I'm a professional. I give that advice, and that was hard for me to do.
Yeah.
Right? So imagine everybody sitting at home. You don't know what that looks like. You know, you don't know what good advice sounds like, right? Like, I make a living giving that advice, and it was like finding a needle in a haystack for me to do it, right? So, like, we can imagine how tough it is for families at home, right?
Oh, yeah,
or for people struggling solo by themselves at home. You know, taking that first step to say, hey, I'm feeling XYZ. I've been isolating. You know, my heart's broken, lost a relationship, lost a job, I'm in financial fear, whatever the deal is. And I need some accountability, man, to get on the ball, to rejoin life. I'm freaked out right now, right? Like, the stigma is still greater than the available solution, right? And I think part of the job we get to do is to influence from these chairs, like, how readily available the solution can be.
Yeah, man.
Right?
I feel like one of them dudes that's at the poker table dealing the cards, but I just got a deck of aces. You just get to chuck them out to people.
Right.
Like, I got you, man.
Right. And there are so many. There's a lot of bad actors out there. I'll say that, but there are so many good people in the healing and helping professions. Right. You know, for someone struggling at home, I'd say, if you're struggling, whether it's drugs, or it's alcohol, it's anxiety, depression, post-traumatic stress, you've got a toxic relationship going on. Step one, tell somebody you trust, right? Call a buddy, call a friend, somebody that you know has your back, right? Tell them the entire truth, right? From there, I want you to track down a counselor. For those of you guys who don't know, there are counselors out there who will work for free. They will work within your insurance. They'll work on a sliding scale. Find a counselor and be honest. Counselors are no good to anybody if you're not going to be honest.
Yeah, I've spent thousands of dollars on counselors and therapists just to lie to them and manipulate. Yeah. And I'm like, this is stupid. Why? I never understood why I do that.
Right. Like, if people at home are struggling, if you do just those two things, tell someone you trust that you've got an issue, right? And then seek counseling advice. Stop there, right? I'm happy for you, right? And then not just seek counseling advice. Don't just make an appointment. Like, let's do the work. Let's figure out.
Be an active participant.
Let's figure out the issue, and then let's get to work. Right. A lot of people have drag wounds from family of origin. Again, the normal we talk about, and it's just I drag this wound that I think is normal. Right. It's just how I grew up. But normal and healthy don't line up. Right. And when we get someone doing their own work, we realize that, hey, I'd much rather be healthy than remain in what was my normal.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And that, to me, those two pieces of advice work for either someone struggling with an addiction or a family member who's worried about a loved one,
Well, if I had the power in and of myself to, fix the issue, there wouldn't have been an issue, right? So, like, I need some outside help with a lot of this stuff.
Or if I think my child, my significant other, or my sibling has an issue, I'm probably right.
Yeah.
Right?
Especially if they're in college 1,000 miles away.
Yeah, if we're talking about young adults and things look funny.
Yeah, man.
Things don't just look funny. They're funny.
Yeah, man.
And funny and tragic are getting a lot closer together. And young adult intervention to me is like, it's my favorite thing. Every time my phone rings, I hope that's what it is. Right. I know you feel
that's my bread and butter, man. That's my favorite milieu to work with, period.
Right.
I love it.
But I also love getting to work with, tenured execs, docs, attorneys. Doctors and attorneys hate us, right? Right?
Yeah, they do.
Because what credentials do you have that make you more intelligent than me?
Have you seen my tattoos? You know what I'm saying?
Right. Right.
I think of one that I worked with for 3 months or 6 months. I can't remember. Executive guy, late 40s. Mm-hmm. He was awesome. He was one of the coolest dudes I've worked with. Just because, once again, it's we never know like what the person is really going to be like until they're in front of us and we're actually doing continued work with them.
Right.
The young adult is always going to be my favorite age bracket. But I mean, I have guys right now that I work with as young as 18 and as old as 66.
Yeah.
And they're all studs. They're all awesome to work with. Never know, But there's that something about that young adult man's, man. I think it's just for me personally, I tend to speak their language and they tend to speak mine.
I think for the young adult, for me, it's the parents. I love getting to work with the parents of the young adult. And that's how you and I have typically like chop the work up is I'll deal with mom and dad and then you can
and I'll work
wrangle
with
the young adult.
Yeah.
And the moms and dads, the relief on the faces, the hugs on the way out the door, it's priceless.
Man.
Like for real, I'd get up and I would do it for free.
Like I got a text message on Saturday, which usually I shouldn't say usually, but I try to shoot for my phone to be semi-quiet on Saturday and Sunday. Mm-hmm. But the same 18-year-old that I've worked with now for 9 months got a year on Friday. And I got a text message from a real emotional text message from his mom, man. It's like, that's the good dope right there. That's the good dope, dude.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Or finding out guys we've intervened on are now working in treatment.
Yeah.
We
have tons of stories like that. I can think of, matter of fact, the first intervention I ever did with you, the individual, he worked in the treatment center that we sent him to, and then he came back to Nashville. And then he worked for another treatment center here. You remember that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And it's like we didn't do that. We didn't facilitate that.
No.
We just got to crack the door open that much.
Yeah.
But cracking the door open that much feels real good, right? Mm-hmm. It's to me it feels almost like personally it does feed me personally, right? Mm-hmm. Like to see a family come together, get whole, get healthy, and then start, family curriculum to like really dig in and do some work. Because I still have that piece in my heart where I'm like, I'm giving a little bit of peace and a little bit of joy and a little bit of time back to my family. That's made up in my own head, but that's the way it feels. Like hugs from those moms and those dads, it feels like I'm giving something back to my mom and my dad, right?
I get that.
You know, put them through hell for 15 years.
Yeah.
And you know, on the professional side, you know, the very first intervention I did, I was a second seat for a lady named Amy, who was a local interventionist here, and my job was to be just a male in the room, say very little, right? But I got last second I got voted to introduce the fact of that while we were there, that we were about to have a conversation about his addiction. And I go to this young man's room. He was 19 years old. And for the 2 years before his mother passed away, he'd been stealing her pain medication, right? And in the couple years since, he'd been living just a shallow life. He was either high and living in a virtual world playing video games, or he was looking for dope, right? And I go up to the young man's room. I've got his family behind me, and I tell him while we're there, and he looks at me. He looks over my shoulder at his father, and he said, "Dad, what took you so long?" And he just starts crying. Like there was no pushback.
A hell of a first intervention.
And I'm sitting there going like, dude, this is all I want to do.
Yeah.
If I can pay the Nashville Electric Service, seeing this, being part of this right here, dude, my life's gold.
So first intervention, man. I mean, if you think about it, though, I mean, you look at the natural progression of how things have progressed, like with everything. And you had a stellar first intervention. I had a really cool experience with the first intervention. It makes sense we're still here because we've seen time and time and time again exactly what it can do for families and for the person struggling.
Right. And for families struggling out there right now, whether to confront the disease of addiction or to stay silent, I'll just say that, hey, my thoughts and my prayers are with you. I think about struggling families every day. You know, I'm not a religious guy, but I am a be grateful and try to be spiritual guy. And there were thousands and thousands and uncountable prayers said for me, while I was struggling, right? And so I try to say one back every day for some other family out there, right? And it's kind of like I'll never pay back all the prayers that were said for me, but I got to try, right? Just sending some vibes, some heart out there to the families that are struggling, and getting to see like the one we did last week, getting to see that family come together, man. There's nothing better than that.
That was a good one. That was a real good one.
All love, all concern, no axe to grind, everything delivered with love, kindness. You even staggered the entrance so as to not overwhelm, I'd
love to tell you I thought about that. That was more of an intuitive thought. Kind of came out of nowhere.
Right. But I think that's part of the details that we get right because we're practiced.
Well, there is a way to do intervention that doesn't have to be like, let's put on the helmet and shoulder pads and just have at it.
Right.
I mean, that one too that you just referenced, like he called me on the Sunday afterwards, 2 days later, just saying thanks, seeing how I was doing. It's like, it's kind of a curveball.
Right.
I was like, wow, you know something I don't know yet? What happened? Yeah. How you doing, man? I hope I'm good. This is different. I like this. This is awesome.
Yeah.
And I talked to him for probably 20 minutes. Hey, I was grocery shopping, which is my least favorite thing to do in the world, by the way. So it was like the best time to call me and tell me he was grateful and he was happy that, the family put it together and so on and so forth, man. Like there's a way to do it. And I just feel like intervention a lot of time gets a bad rap. Sometimes, like, can it be a confrontational thing?
It's a scary word.
Exactly.
It's a scary word, right? But I think it's like when we phrase it as, hey, this is strategic support. Intervention is part of what we do. And it's kind of the highlight that the families think is what's going to happen.
Yeah.
but it's actually a really small part.
It is
of an entire process, right? Mm-hmm. And you know, I believe it's next week we're going to show what we're going to mock up an intervention so that everyone can actually see how it's delivered and what it looks like. Right?
Good.
Yeah.
I'm excited for that. It's going to be fun.
Yeah. So that's all we've got today. Thank you guys for tuning in and checking us out. The Die Sober podcast will be back with y'all real soon. See y'all soon.
See you.